a new type of simple dwelling never seen before. And it's in the exact location where both the Merneptah Stela and the Bible place the Israelites.
The sites in which this type of house appears throughout the country, this is where Israelites lived. And they are sometimes even called the Israelite house, the Israelite type house. The people who lived in those villages seem to be arranged more or less in a kind of an egalitarian society because there are no major architectural installations. If you look at the finds are relatively poor. Pottery is more or less mundane. I don't want to offend the early settlers or the early Israelites. Very little art.
Curiously, the mundane pottery found at these new Israelite villages is very similar to the everyday pottery found at the older Canaanite cities like Hatzor. In fact, the Israelite house is practically the only thing that is different. This broad similarity is leading archaeologists to a startling new conclusion about the origins of the ancient Israelites.
The notion is that most of the early Israelites were originally Canaanites, displaced Canaanites.
The Israelites were always in the land of Israel. They were natives, but they were different kinds of groups. They were basically the have-nots.
So what we're dealing with is a movement of peoples, but not an invasion of armed hordes from outside, but rather a social and economic revolution.
Ancient texts describe how the Egyptian rulers and their Canaanite vassal kings burdened the lower classes of Canaan with taxes and even slavery. A radical new theory based on archaeology suggests what happens next. As that oppressive social system declines, families and tribes of serfs, slaves, and common Canaanites seize the opportunity. In search of a better way of life, they abandon the old city-states and head for the hills. Free from the oppression of their past, they eventually emerge in a new place as a new people. The Israelites.
In the text, you have a story of the Israelites coming from outside and then besieging the Canaanite cities, destroying them, and then becoming a nation in the land of Canaan.
7 shirts from the Middle Bronze Age.
Whereas archaeology tells us something which is the opposite.
The Late Bronze Age.
According to archaeology, the rise of early Israel is an outcome of the collapse of Canaanite society, not the reason for that collapse.
Archaeology reveals that the Israelites were themselves originally Canaanites. So why does the Bible consistently cast the Israelites as outsiders in Canaan? Abraham's wanderings from Mesopotamia, Moses leading slaves out of Egypt and into the Promised Land, and Joshua conquering Canaan from outside. The answer may lie in their desire to forge a distinctly new identity.
Identity is created, as psychologists tell us, by talking about what you are not, by talking about another. In order to figure out who I am, I have to figure out who I am not.
Conspicuously absent from Israelite villages are the grand palaces and the extravagant pottery associated with the kings and rich elites of Canaan.
The Israelites did not like the Canaanite system, and they defined themselves in contrast to that system. So by not using decorated pottery, by not using important pottery, they developed an ideology of simplicity, which marked the difference between them and the Egyptian Canaanite system.
If the Israelites wanted to distinguish themselves from their Canaanite past, what better way than to create a story about destroying them? But the stories of Abraham, Exodus, and the conquest serve another purpose. They celebrate the power of what the Bible says is the foremost distinction between the Israelites and all other people: their God.